My name's Pete Bullimore. I'm a voice hearer. I'm not just a voice hearer. I'm proud to say I'm a voice hearer. They're my experiences and I own them. Now, it's great to be here today doing some work for the Miss Roberts Foundation. What we're going to look at on this video is Work with Unusual Beliefs, Training Module 3. Now, some of the things I'm going to talk about on here, they may seem a little bit distressing, but what I'm trying to see this is through the person's eyes. When working with unusual beliefs, you try and see them through your eyes, you'll never understand them. You've got to understand them from that person's perspective. Now, Module 3 of 5, the MRF offers a series of online training modules and the experience of hearing voices and paranoia. Working with the person's own reality. Where the person's own reality is straightforward and can be used by anyone. Special training is not required. The strategies are simple to use, being successfully used by nurses, occupational therapists, support workers, psychologists, relatives, individuals for self-help. We've got to look at the risk of belief modification. Attempt to change someone's unusual beliefs can cause emotional distress. Imagine experiencing discrimination because of your race or gender. You're told you were misinterpreting things, could lead to feelings of depression, feelings of judgment and anger. Belief modification techniques that try to convince some of their beliefs are wrong can alienate them instead of helping them. Now, this was a lady down in Exeter. We needed to get this lady to drink water. She said, "I cannot drink water from Exeter because it's poisoned." Now, she's been told it was poisoned by the voices that she heard. Now, people tried everything to get her to drink the water because she wouldn't. She said, "It's poison, I'm not drinking it." She was placed on a Section 2 of the Mental Health Act, which is a 28-day incarceration. But they did everything they could to try and get her to drink water. She wouldn't. But the problem is, people don't look at the reality of what they're saying about the belief systems. What she was saying is, the water in Exeter is poisoned. She didn't say the world's water was poisoned, the water in Exeter is poisoned. So we did this very, very simple. We got a Vitel water, it's from France. She started to drink the water. She felt better within herself. She got off a section, she redeveloped her social networks. This lady is now a consultant psychiatrist. But when she goes to Exeter, she will not drink the water because it's poisoned. Now, if you look at her belief system, 5 years prior to this, there was a chemical spill in the water. Her beliefs are based on evidence. The water has been poisoned, so you can argue maybe her voices were trying to keep her safe. Now, the next one, this was a guy, we need to get this person to eat. He said, "I don't need to eat because I'm invincible." But the main aim is to try and get him to eat. Now, this was not a straightforward belief, but imagine it was, but it wasn't. How could you use the invincibility to get him to eat? What could we do? We could get him to prove it. Well, if you're invincible, why don't you eat? So other people from worrying, work around the belief. Now, we tried everything we could to get this man to eat, but he wouldn't. Now, I was working with a psychologist friend of mine, Terry McLaughlin. Now, when you're working with belief systems, it's something you have to catch. It's something called the in to that belief system. They will give it you, you have to catch it. He said to Terry and myself one day, he just said, "You know, you two, you're wasting your time. You will never, ever get me to eat because going to the toilet is a disgusting habit. That's your in. There's something in this story he hasn't told you. So at that point, you don't push. You have to back off. Because there's something he hasn't told you. You've got to earn more trust. We cannot assume trust. You have to earn trust. We spent more time gaining his trust than found out what it was. Up to the age of 5 years old, his parents hardly ever cleaned him. He grew up in his own feces. In later years, he had a massive flashback. He saw a 5-year-old boy in a corner of the bathroom covered in feces. He couldn't deal with it. If I don't eat, I don't have to go through it." So finding that evidence behind that belief is very, very important. This was a guy called John. We had to be very careful with this belief system because we had very little background on this guy. Now, we did something and his psychiatrist was up in arms about this, but he just wasn't thinking broadly enough. Now, John was convinced that people would attack him with knives, so he refused to leave the house. We've got to look at how we're going to get out of the house and how we're going to make him feel safe when leaving the house, important thing. So we use what we call protection strategies. And this is a quote from John. "I was living in a nightmare world, filled with terror words I cannot describe. I acted normally, but the world was terrifying. Using protection strategies reduced my distress significantly. Without them, my health would deteriorate I'd have blackouts and be paralysed with fear. Now, you can't leave someone like that. We've got to be very, very careful. So we've got to look at where we wouldn't go. We're not going to go to shopping malls. We're not going to go to restaurants. There's knives there. So what we did, we identified a local park. Hardly anyone used it. We said 5 of us will go with you. So we're planning where we're going to go first. The big problem was we don't know a lot of background on this guy. Maybe somebody's trying to kill him. We don't know. So we've got to be very careful. So this is where his psychiatrist was up in arms, said we're going to discriminate him. What we did, we bought him a stab-proof vest and got him an attack alarm. It cost me £25 second hand off Sheffield Police. You can buy them off the internet now. But what the psychiatrist said, you're going to stigmatise him walking around in a stab-proof vest. Don't be stupid, it's going under his coat, no one's going to see it. After about 3 months, he left the alarm. After 5 months, he took the vest off. I have to be really honest with you, I don't know where that belief system came from, but we worked around it so he could make it secondary and then he could start to function. That was the important thing. Now this was an interesting one, and this was a lady, and she should say she got attacked by 2 snakes. One would clamp on her mouth here, one would clamp on her mouth there. She said she knew no one else could see them, but she could, and she found them very distressing. She had a very supportive boyfriend, and she told him about this. She said, look, I know you can't see these snakes, but when they get on my face, I can't speak. It's very difficult. So if I make a certain signal, will you come and pull these snakes off my face? And he said that he would. She sat on the sofa one evening, she made the signal. The boyfriend knew the snakes were on her face. He knew where they were located. So he walked across the room and he pulled them. She could feel them detached from her mouth. What we later found out, that when she was 14 years old, she had to perform oral sex on 2 men at the same time against their will. They were phallic symbols, was pulling penises out of her mouth. Yeah, again, about looking at the cultural protection strategy, I received a phone call from this lady, and she said, I wonder if you could help me. And to be honest, I don't really know how she heard about me, and she was from a travelling community. And she came to see me, said, we've had a fallout with another travelling community, and they've put a curse on me. And on a certain day, at a certain time, this evil spirit, this devil, demon, is going to enter my body, and it's going to control me for the rest of my life, and I'll never be able to get rid of it. So we spoke for a while, and I just said, within your culture, how would you deal with this? Well, I said, the demon's about to enter my body. If I'm walking across running water, it can't enter my body. Well, the site that you're on, could you not put a hose pipe on? There's running water. She said, there's no water on the site, Pete. And the time was getting very close, and I wasn't really sure how to deal with this. And about the day before, I just had an idea, and I called her and I said, tomorrow, 10 minutes before this demon's going to enter your body, I'd like to start walking down the street. Do not stop walking till that time has passed. That demon will not enter your body. So how will that help? Because in every town, in every city, under the pavements, there's water pipes. We're constantly walking over water, and that's what she did, and the demon never entered her body. When we look about decoding beliefs, now sometimes people's statements seem bizarre. Decoding often reveals emotional meanings. Now, someone might say, I am an alien. People might say this for many different reasons. What we've found is, I feel like an alien. I don't fit into society. They're being excluded. And I'm being poisoned. And there's many variables. Some of the top ones were, I don't think I can trust people right now. Medication is making me feel sick. And I'm a prophet. I'm not special, then I must be crazy. I can really relate to this. Before I went into psychiatric care, I had a business turning £1 million a year over. I had 9 people working for me on the shop floor. When I went mad, not one of them ever came to see me. So I'm trying to make sense of my experiences. So I thought, in my mind, they're my disciples, they've betrayed me. Before I went into psychiatric care, I had an out-of-body experience. I've died and I've resurrected. I've been on the acute wards, I've been to hell and back. It fits. I must be Jesus Christ. We always say you're not a fully paid up member of the Psychotic Society unless you've been Jesus. So with this newfound information, what shall I do? I thought, I'll go to Sheffield Cathedral, I'll go and show myself. So I made my way there in my scruffy state. As I got to big wooden doors, I thought, oh damn, they crucified Christ. I must have a Last Supper. So I went to McDonald's, got this sausage and egg McMuffin, contemplating my crucifixion. And I walked into the cathedral, and a man stopped me, and he said to me, "What do you want?" "Well, I've come to see the main man, I've come to show myself." So that talked to me for about 10 minutes. I could tell he wasn't really listening to anything I said. But then he foolishly left me. Now in those days, there was a pulpit facing the main auditorium. There's one side on. There's a vicar side on doing a sermon to some old age pensioners. So I seized my chance. And I down the cathedral, he never saw me coming, and I just jumped in the pulpit aside of him, and he actually went, "Christ almighty." I thought, well, fantastic, he's recognised me. So I had to stop the whole sermon. We had this long drawn out conversation with him saying, "Have you ever been in a psychiatric ward?" So yeah, a few times. What's that got to do with anything? So I'm starting a group for people with mental health problems. Would you like to come? And he took all my details, but I never heard from him since. But then you get the madness of the system in this. I was in the town centre, I was still convinced I was a messiah, and I was trying to recruit disciples. And I got arrested by the police. They took me back to the psychiatric ward where I'd been many times. And as I walked down the ward, a young nurse stopped me. She says, "Why are you back here?" And I'm being facetious. I'm saying, "Well, the police have brought me." Then I said, "Can you not see I'm Jesus Christ? You have never seen a look of horror go across a young nurse's face as fast in all your life." And she disappeared, and she came out with a senior nurse I knew quite well. She says, "Oh, Pete, I hear you think you're Jesus Christ." I says, "No, I don't. I know I am." She said, "Well, you're causing us a real problem, Pete. We've already got 2 Jesuses on the ward. And if we admit you, it might upset the status quo." But this is where their madness comes in. She actually then said to me, "Are you sure you're not John the Baptist?" Because I'd often downgraded me to John the Baptist. I'm Jesus Christ. What if I'd accepted being John the Baptist on a senior staff member's say so, and then I'm on ward round, the psychiatrist says, "What's brought you back here, Peter?" "Well, can you not see I'm John the Baptist?" "No, you're not. Your member of staff said I was." Absolute crazy, absolute crazy. And maybe someone's watching me. Why am I being constantly observed? This happens quite often. People may experience paranoia or hear voices. They get put on a psychiatric ward, and then they put on observation, but nobody tells them why. If a stranger following them around the ward and sat at the bottom of the bed staring at them. There's a secret army out to get me. My family's keeping secrets from me. I think sometimes, not all family members, but some do. They'll tell you, "Don't tell anyone what's wrong with you." Why is it my fault? I remember when I'd been homeless for a while, and then I moved in with my parents, and they said to me, "Don't tell anyone what's wrong with you." But then the irony of it would be I'd be sat in the front room, I'd be very, very paranoid, and the serving hatches are open, and my mum's sat in the kitchen with a stranger. I've never met this woman in my life, but I can hear every word of every conversation. Be careful what you say, he's really paranoid. I'm not surprised you're talking about with a complete stranger in the other room, so I wonder I'm bloody paranoid, isn't it? This was a lady I was working with in Denmark, and a voice has told her if she went outside, a train would run over her and kill her. Now, she hadn't left the rehab centre for a long, long time, and it took a lot of support and encouragement to get her to do this. And I spent a lot of time talking to her. I told her a bit about myself, my own family, trying to gain that trust. And I said to her one day, "I'd like you to trust me on something. I'd like you to come outside this unit with me today. We're going to walk down the road, we're going to let a train run over us both, and we won't die." She says, "That's not possible, Pete. You know, you can't let a train run over you and you won't die." I said, "Look, but I want to lose my wife and my children and my grandchildren. I wouldn't put them at risk. You've got to trust me on this." It took me a long, long time to gain the trust, and I held her hand as we left. Now, no one's ever held a squoze my hand as tight as that ever. What I'd noticed down the bottom of the road, there was railway bridges. We walked down there, we stood under the bridge, train ran over the top of the bridge, trains run over us but it's not killed us. And that broke down the social isolation. She started to integrate into society again. When we look about decoding beliefs, this was a guy I was working with, and he asked me if I would share this on the training. Now, I'll call him Michael, I will change his name. Now, Michael was from a mixed race background, and it's very, very important you've got to get their ethnic origin. But I couldn't. Because at the first session when he turned up, he said to me, "If you ask me any questions, I'm going to effing punch you." Anyway, he actually swore, he didn't use that word. So I thought, okay, I'm not asking any questions. And he went on for about 60 minutes going on. And then I thought, well, how do I know if he wants another appointment? That's a question, I'm going to get punched. So I didn't ask him. I just gave him a card with the time and the date on it. To be honest, I didn't think he would come back, but he did. And it's going on for for ages and ages. Then he just said, this is an absolute waste of time, this. Absolute waste of time. He said, all my life's written down. No one wants to read it. If I say, can I read it? I'm going to get punched. That's a question. I've got to be very careful here. I said, I'll read it. That's not a question. You can't punch me. And he brought it in. I said, I'm going to read this at home. It was absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. But some of it I don't understand, because I've got to understand it from his perspective. And I said to him, look, Michael, I'm going to have to ask you some questions, mate. Because I can't work on opinion and assumptions. I can only work on facts. I need to ask you about this. Because I was doing it in my own time, we started to build that trust. And he said to me one day, he said, you know, when I was a young boy, Peter, my mum poisoned me. So what do you mean poison you? What with? Petrol. She made me drink petrol. So what do you mean petrol? Petrol. I thought there's something out there called petrol I don't know about. I'm looking for, I can't find anything. And then he came to see me the following week. He says, you know, when I was 7, Pete, I was in a famous Munchausen by proxy case, you know. And I said, why? He says, I told you my mum poisoned me. What with? He says, petrol. So I'm looking on the internet for Munchausen by proxy cases. Boy age 7. He said he got thrown out of coke because of his age. Now remember, I've not asked his ethnic origin. And I found one case, 7-year-old boy. The mum was from North Korea. The dad was from Jamaica. I don't tell him what I've found. I just say, oh, Michael, I owe you an apology, mate. I forgot to ask your ethnic origin. Where's your mum and dad from? Mum's from North Korea, my dad's from Jamaica. Why? The exact case. He had been in a Munchausen by proxy case. And then he said to me, you know, when I was 9, Pete, and he's from a Jehovah's Witness background. He said, I was in a local church, and somebody shouted, jumped up and said, F Jehovah. And somebody shouted, deliver him. He says, and Pete, they killed him in church while I was there. I was 9, they cut his liver out. So I spoke to his consultant about this, and he just said, oh, take the notice, Pete, they're just illusions. I thought, no, I'm going to check this out. We have a local paper called the Sheffield Star, and I spent 2 days down there going through the archives. Yes, it did. Date, time and event. He's telling you his life. You have to hear the right to hear it. And he said to me one day, Pete, what's Gabriel's law? Now, quite often when you say things like that, the first thing that popped into my mind was the Archangel Gabriel, but it wasn't. Gabriel's law is a law that's been set down in San Diego in America to protect children from paedophiles. That's Gabriel's law. What's Michael telling you? He's been abused. You have to hear the right to hear it. Then he says to me, there's different doors to a parallel universe, Pete, and sometimes I'll go through them. Now, as human beings, what do we do to survive physical and emotional pain? We dissociate. So a parallel universe is going into. What's creating his fear and problems in his life? He has to dissociate to another world and get out of this world. And then he said to me one day, Pete, who's William Sargent and you and Cameron? Well, I knew they were. William Sargent was a psychiatrist, very into ECT and insulin therapy, those kind of things. Now, before antipsychotics, neuroleptics, the recovery rates from schizophrenia through talking treatments was 33%. In 1953, Largactil was introduced, chlorpromazine. Now, what Sargent said was, this is going to revolutionise the prognosis of schizophrenia. Since the introduction of antipsychotic medication, the recovery rates from schizophrenia is 33%. So it's not the 33% recovering from talking treatments. Surely it should be 66%. What's Michael asking you? Why am I taking all these drugs? Why is no one talking to me? And Ewan Cameron was a Scotsman, and he wanted to get the Nobel Prize. He went to America and he convinced the military that he could brainwash people, and they invested one hell of a lot of money. Now what he did, I think it was 20 people he selected for the trials, and every one of them had a diagnosis of schizophrenia. What he did, he gave them massive doses of LSD, then individually on their own for 1 week, he locked them in a sensory deprivation tank. He took them out, he gave them electric shock treatment 10 times above the recommended dose. He tied them to beds and he implanted microphones in the pillows to brainwash them. After the experiment, every one of them ended their own lives. He was on a massive homicide charge. What he did, he shredded all the information, went to court and said they never took part in these experiments, and he walked free from court. What's Michael asking you? Am I just another experiment that one day people are going to kill with all these drugs? It was quite interesting. One day he said to me, Hitler's alive, you know, Pete. I don't know, Mike, could be for all I know. But look at the acts of Hitler. Tried to take over the world, persecuted the Jewish community. There's a word for that. That's tyranny. Hitler was a tyrant. So if Hitler's still alive, what's Michael telling you? Someone out there still trying to control him. It makes, and I've made that look easy. Believe you me, it wasn't easy. When you are working with people with these beliefs, don't worry about getting it wrong. You may go away, look something up. You know what you were telling me last week? Is this what you're trying to explain to me? No. You might get it wrong 10 times. Slowly they'll start to let you more and more into their world. It's interesting, I had a really good nurse that supported him, Susie, and she said to me one day, Pete, what are you doing with Mike? He's really coming on. And she said, can I sit in one of the sessions? Well, I have to ask him. And he said that she could. Now, Michael was usually 30 minutes early for his session. This one day he was 10 minutes late. I was getting really upset. I said, don't worry about it, mate, we'll just run over. And Susie sat in with us, and he just said, can I tell you why I'm late, Pete? I said, yeah, of course you can. He says, well, I was walking out your office this morning, and you've probably seen this guy, Peter. He's about 6'5", square-jawed, really handsome, wears all the designer clothes, he's dripping in gold, he's worth a fortune, all the women fancy him. So he called me from across the road. He said, look, Michael, I just bought this brand new sports car. I'm driving to Barbados this morning, do you fancy coming? So we drove to Barbados this morning, Pete. On the way back, we didn't expect the traffic to be as busy. So that's why I'm late, so I'm sorry. And Susie's just sat there shaking her head. Anyway, and he left, and she said to me, what the hell is he going on about? Well, that guy does exist. He does, yes, he does. It's his alter ego. He wants to be someone. He wants to be seen. He wants to be part of society. So once again, what we're looking for in someone's life is neglect. All these beliefs, they start to make sense. When you look at them from that other person's perspective, you see them through your eyes, you won't ever understand them. And this was an interesting one. A lady brought this to supervision. She said, I just don't know what to do with this guy, Pete. He says his daddy's an emperor. Vampires attack him. He lives on a spaceship. He's a fox. He's a philosopher. So give him a bit of background to this guy. And I said, well, let's look at this again. If his dad's an emperor, what would his dad be in the eyes of society? He'd be famous, memorable, but he'd also be visible. People would recognise him. What's that make an emperor's son? Makes them visible. Again, look for neglect in this person's life. It's becoming more and more prominent. And she said, well, he says vampires attack him. I said, well, you've told me as well that this guy is treatment resistant, but he takes clozapine, Clozaril. Look at that again, what this man's telling you. He's been he's treatment resistant. He's been placed on antipsychotic medication that can kill him if he doesn't have his drugs taken every month. The clue's in there. They're sucking the blood out of me. But also, what do vampires suck out of people? Not just blood. It's life. This system is sucking the life out of me. You've put me on something that's very dangerous and you tell me that they cannot help. And he said that he lives on a spaceship. But very similar to what we were just saying about Michael. He's escaping on a dissociative state. And then he said, what about him being a fox? Well, let's go again. In England, fox hunting's been banned. But it still happens with the gentry. So for a fox, how does it need to survive? You can hear the hunters, the horns, the dogs barking. That fox has to be very hyper-vigilant to survive. Because we're very hyper-vigilant when we're guarding ourselves from danger. What's the danger in this person's life? And then again, let's look at this again. He's a philosopher. What would a philosopher do with all this? Try and work it out and make sense of it. It makes sense when you look at it from their perspective. You put interpretation in there, you cannot work on that. You can only work on the facts. So when we're looking at through this, we're looking at what does a person need or want? What belief is stopping them from getting what they need? There's two things you can go around this. What things can the person do to get around a belief? What things can the person think to get around a belief and achieve the ultimate aim? The ultimate goal is achieved. The original blocking belief still exists. We're not trying to get rid of it, we're trying to make it secondary so the person can function. That's the most important thing. So it's important we take back power. Many overwhelming belief systems come from a lack of control. Beliefs themselves, they're not the problem. Fear and powerlessness can keep people trapped in cycles of distress. Recovery is aided by finding power within the belief system. It's very, very important. Never ever attack belief systems because they are important to that person. This is the MARF training module. The next module will be making sense of paranoia using the 3 stages of paranoia. Now, after viewing this video, if you feel you require assistance or support, please contact Lifeline's 24-hour support line. There's 131114. Now, that's the support line in Australia. You may be in a different country. In England, it will be the Samaritans, different countries with different support lines. Please see if you can find a support line if you do need support. It's very, very important because you're doing some very difficult things. Or you could contact your mental health practitioner or a family member or friend. There are support services out there that we can use. Again, thank you for giving your time and listening. Thank you.